My name is Allison Streaker, and I am the coffee coordinator at Fairtrade International. I'm currently in Bonn, Germany, so excuse me. It's quite early here this morning, but we're very excited to be on this webinar, and I will be acting as the moderator today. So before we get started, I guess just check to make sure that the attendees can hear everything okay and they can see all the video screens. Let's see if anybody wrote in the chat. Okay, I'm going to assume that everyone can hear okay. If you do have issues, please write to us in the chat and let us know. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a brief introduction to Fairtrade and why we are here today. So this webinar is hosted by NAP, the Fairtrade Producer Network for Asia and the Pacific in the Fairtrade system. So for those of you that are new here, we just want to go over a little bit about Fairtrade and about the purpose of today's webinar. So many of you may know that fair trade is an alternative approach to conventional trade and is based on a partnership between producers and consumers. The fair trade certification worldwide encompasses 1.7 million farmers and workers who own 50% of the fair trade system and have a vote and a voice at the General Assembly. The current system, as I mentioned, is comprised of over 1,500 small-scale producer organizations and hired labor organizations across 75 countries. So today's webinar is primarily focused on Asia and the Pacific and is hosted by NAP, who, as I mentioned before, is our representing producer network in that region. Just in the area that NAP covers, we have 284 producer countries and producer organizations across 20 countries. Again, would like to give everybody a really warm welcome today. We know that the circumstances haven't been the best for many of you, and so that's why, thanks to NAP, we put together this webinar to present give a current analysis of the coffee market outlook across major fair trade coffee destinations and talk a little bit about what sustainability looks like or could look like in this uncertain world. So we'll have a number of guests today, including the Global Product Manager from Fairtrade International. We have someone on from Fairtrade America in the United States to discuss market trends, challenges, and opportunities. And then we'll hear from some of NAP's own producers and hear a little bit about what's going on the ground. So we will get started, and I would like to introduce Mr. Sanjit Singh Khurana. He is the Chief Operations Officer at NAP. He will be giving the welcome address today. So Sanjit, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alison, and a warm welcome to all who have joined us for this webinar. Gideon, can we just start with the slides? It's great to have an expert panel here with us. Thank you for all of you joining us here for this first webinar. Like Alison mentioned, this is the first in its hopefully in a series of webinars which we will be hosting in the next few months. And it's great to have an expert panel with us today who will share their insights and experiences and also answer your questions towards the end. So I will start by giving a brief introduction. It'll be brief, basically because in-depth analysis will be taken up by the other panelists who will go into what are the causes for the disruptions in the coffee supply chain and how this pandemic is having an impact on all the businesses and people in the APAC region. So let's start. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah. So these are the few things which I'll be touching upon. We'll start with the context. Although the origin and timing of this virus is still being debated, the impact is felt across the globe. And I don't think there's any country which has been left unscathed. Different countries are adopting different approaches to contain and cope with this pandemic. And some countries have learned better than others in formulating responses, especially after having gone through the SARS and the 2007-2008 food crisis. The most widely adopted approach is the lockdown approach, which has in most countries disrupted parts of the supply chain, particularly the food production and processing and the transport sectors. Physical access to food, as you know, is a very important part of the food security, where consumers are able to access food and farmers are able to get their produce to the consumers in a common marketplace. The disruption in supply chains due to the lockdown measures has seen perishables, in some cases, being dumped, fed as livestock to animals, or even left to rot. I mean, they just don't have the resources to even harvest some of the produce. And all this is because the farmers have a lot of challenges in harvesting their produce in time, and then transporting them to the market. So basically, that's the story of most of the perishables which our farmers are growing in our region. Next slide, please. Oh no, the previous one. Sorry. Yes. When we talk about the impact and the severity of this is as diverse as the region itself, and all the players in the supply chain are facing enormous challenges. But I think undoubtedly the most vulnerable are at the bottom of the pyramid, and they are suffering the most. Farmers are struggling due to cash crunch, resulting in drastic reduction in their production capacities. And the upcoming season is here. The monsoons are upon us, so it's a little it's quite a big challenge for them to organize money to buy and provide for inputs. And the companies and traders are also facing the same issue, which is directly impacting the companies, the workers and the farmers in their system. But I think the biggest impact this pandemic has had on the agri sector is that of manpower displacement, especially the migrant workers. The supply chain in Asia is not as mechanized as in the West, and this has impacted not only the upstream activities, but also the transportation and distribution. Tried and tested management strategies are being questioned right now. And economists are suggesting moving from just in time to just in case. So people have to just kind of adapt themselves to what's in store for them. So all of this we've seen has exposed the fragility of an interdependent global economy, as exporting countries are imposing trade restrictions to keep supplies to themselves. Another metric of food security is food affordability, which is measured by the food prices. The increases what we see now mainly reflect the supply chain delays and not real shortages. So producers are able to produce their goods. The problem is in the rest of the supply chain, transportation, warehousing, manpower. So basically that is what the immediate challenge is to remedy. Next slide, please. What are the concerns and challenges that we face? Like I said, with the monsoons in this region upon us, a big concern in the Asia Pacific is the disruption of the crop planting, which, as you know, is heavily dependent on the rains and has to be perfectly planned. And now, as governments in most countries move towards reopening their economies, people and businesses are challenged to balance between the health and the food security. Specific to coffee, if I just touch upon that briefly, you may know that about 80% of the coffee in the world is produced by 25 million small farmers, and about 125 million people depend on activities associated with coffee farms for their livelihood. Even before the crisis, the lack of investment in modernization and the impact of climate change pose serious threats to the sustainability of the coffee sector. Medium and small farmers were already having difficulty covering operational costs. And to add to that, now with the possible shortage of manpower, the challenges only become more difficult and harder. Ironically, and it is fortunate that countries have not been infected, nor are they showing peak infections at the same time. Thankfully, this has provided a window of opportunity in some cases to tackle the disrupted supply chains. It has also provided opportunities for later infected countries to learn from the mitigation actions taken by others, which have been severely impacted and infected earlier. Next slide, please. Briefly, some of the economic projections that are coming out now. A global credit rating agency, Standard & Poor, has forecast the permanent income loss for Asia Pacific to be in the region of about over $600 million, which is 55% higher than its previous projection and may continue to rise depending on how long we struggle with this situation. The region's economic growth forecast has also been reduced by 10% from 3 to 2.7% for the current year. In the past, some econometric analysis indicated that GDP growth and coffee consumption are correlated. On an average, a 1% drop in GDP growth globally is associated with 0.95% lower growth in coffee consumption in relative terms, which means considering the global output, approximately about 1.6 million bags, 60 kilo bags, in absolute terms is what the impact is going to be with each percentage drop in GDP. As a result, coffee consumption levels could stagnate or even decline compared to the pre-crisis years, which had steadily shown increase of 2 to 3% per annum. ADB has estimated that the economic losses in Asia Pacific could range from about $1.7 trillion under a short containment scenario of 3 months, or it could go up to $2.5 trillion under a long containment scenario of about 6 months. And we don't even know if that is realistic. And this alone will account for 30% of the overall decline in the global output. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. How do we adapt to change? The Asia Pacific region is home to over 60% of humanity and has very diverse food systems and multiplex of supply chains. The sub-regions are frequently exposed to severe weather events and some of the most challenging environments for agriculture. In this scenario, adoption of smart agriculture tools in precision farming will certainly help farmers manage better with the limited resources available to them. It will help in controlling pest and disease, increase productivity, improve quality, optimize water usage, and thereby help in reducing the overall cost of production. Also, some good closed loop regenerative farm practices can also be adopted to help rejuvenate our depleted soils and also to reduce the dependence on chemical inputs. Overall, these practices will certainly help in mitigating the risks of climate change and its impact on agriculture. Another change that we are seeing now is the growing focus on support to local businesses and producers. This is gaining traction in many countries. And because of this, we need to start reimagining our marketing strategies through shorter supply chains to start with and others to follow. Yeah, the next slide, please. Support, continuing support to our members. The spread of this virus continues as we speak, and we have to wait and watch the impact these relaxations are going to have going forward. At NAP, all our channels of communication are open, and we continue to stay connected with all our members to help them navigate through these challenging times. A majority of our producers have taken the lead in conducting awareness programs and campaigns. And they've also, gone ahead with providing medical supplies and rations to their farmers and workers. NAP, along with Fairtrade International and our other partners, have developed a relief and a resilience fund for both emergency support and also to help rebuild the depleted production capacities of our members. We certainly are on different boats, but yes, we are all facing the same storm. So with that, I'd like to thank you all once again for joining this webinar. And I also welcome those who have just joined us now. And I hand back the platform to Alison. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjit. Just share my webcam here. Okay, great. So thank you very much for that introduction. Here we have Peter Kettler. Before we get started with Peter, we do have a listener's poll. So if we could please bring up the poll, that would be great. Okay, and we would just ask participants to please take a minute and answer this poll so we can get a quick idea of who is with us today in this webinar. We'll give just a minute or two. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly share the polling results. So we do have a pretty diverse audience here today, so that's great. Everybody can see the results. We have about 20% of participants in today's webinar are traders. We have a minimal amount of roasters and coffee brands, and then we kind of have an even balance of folks from the Fairtrade system, coffee producers, and then we have a last category of media houses, educational institutions, NGOs, etc. So I just wanted to share that with you all today. Now we will move on to the next presenter, who I have the honor of giving the floor, and that is Mr. Peter Cutler, the Global Coffee Manager for Fairtrade International. He will talk a bit today about what sustainability looks like in an uncertain world and in this sort of time of COVID-19, as well as what Fairtrade International response has been to the virus. So Peter, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Allison. Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me to this really important discussion. I think that everybody is looking for some level of certainty and some sense of direction in this really uncertain world and in these really unusual set of circumstances. I can't say that I have a really clear crystal ball about exactly what's going to happen in the coffee industry. And I'd just like to say that I think that many of the problems that fair trade producers are facing are also being faced by the wider coffee industry. They may be a little bit more acute in some regions, especially related to fair trade certified coffees. But I think that generally speaking, we can say that whenever this pandemic is over, farmers will continue to grow coffee, consumers will continue to drink coffee, but whatever happens in between is sort of up for grabs right now. You know, I don't think that anyone really has a clear idea about how supply chains will work and exactly what the impacts are going to be in terms of both logistics, but also the global economy. Can you go to the next slide? So we do have some facts and how these different impacts and these different facts continue to influence the global coffee trade are sort of unknown right now. We know that both in the EU and certainly in North America and to a certain extent in Asia, the out-of-home sector has collapsed. We know that it's collapsed by up to 90% in some countries, in some regions, and we did see a temporary uptick in grocery sales as people started to respond to what a lockdown meant and how often they'd be able to go out to the grocery store and get supplies. And coffee is certainly one of those things that people want to make sure that they have on hand on a daily basis. So we started to see a certain aspect of hoarding that happened where people were buying much more than what they actually needed, and that fell across several different categories, not just coffee. But that uptick in grocery sales has now sort of evened out. So for many companies that really featured specialty coffee, such as chain cafes in various cities around the world, as well as restaurants, all of that business has now sort of evaporated, and no one really knows when it's going to come back and exactly under what conditions it's going to come back. Many of the smaller regional chains are starting to say that they're struggling to pay for their employees' salaries and trying to stay afloat by paying their rent and paying their utilities. But the longer that this goes on, the uncertainty increases about exactly to what level and how viable they're going to be going forward. Meanwhile, we're starting to see supply chain challenges as well. And in many countries, it depends upon where they are in their harvest cycle. For example, in certain areas in Africa, they've already completed their harvest, and much of the coffee has already gone through the secondary processing and is now waiting shipment at ports. In other areas such as Peru and certainly in Brazil, we're starting to see that there's an impact due to a restriction on internal movement for hired labor. And even in some cases, like in Colombia, we're starting to see that local citizens are being engaged to come out and actually help to pick coffee. The government has distributed some unique machinery, which has to do with vibrating the branches and getting some of the beans to fall down, but it isn't at the efficiency that a usual picking would happen. Concurrently, we're also seeing a shortage of shipping containers, and that's due to a number of different issues. Number one being that the coronavirus began and originated in China, and so a lot of the manufacturing was shut down earlier. And so a lot of shipping containers are now stuck in ports there. There's also an ongoing trade war between the United States and China, and that has slowed down the movement of containers as well. People aren't shopping as much in the usual way, and so we have a lot of material and goods that are stuck in ports just waiting for distribution, but especially here in the US and in certain areas in the EU, a lot of the stores are shut down, and so people aren't able to go out and actually purchase those goods in a way that they're used to. In the same way, a lot of trading houses are shut down, and so people are working from home and don't have access to their labs, which really restricts the usual sort of exchange of samples and the evaluation of samples and offers being made. So that's another restriction on the global supply chain that is really impacting the movement of coffee. The other thing that's starting to happen in the United States especially, and to a certain degree in the EU, but not quite as much because there's more of a social safety net in the EU, is we now have record high unemployment. 1 out of every 4 workers is now unemployed in the United States. Those workers who are still engaged in some sort of employment are seeing salary cuts. And because of the uncertainty of the situation, people are starting to make different buying choices. And whether that reflects in making choices around goods that are of lower cost or may just be strictly local, all of those have effects on how coffee is moving through the system. Can you go to the next slide, Allison? So I guess in my mind, there's 2 different scenarios that are sort of emerging. One is around this idea of local sustainability. As unemployment continues to increase in consuming countries, and again, I'm primarily talking about North America, people are more inclined to look at what the needs are in their own communities, sometimes in their own families. There's a lot of people who are out of work. A lot of the local companies that they had supported for a long time are now struggling just to keep their doors open. And so there's a sort of a redirection of focus and priority toward what's in your backyard. And unfortunately, in a lot of consuming countries, coffee is not considered a local product. And so as a result, they're starting to say, okay, the amount of money that I have available, I want to help either a food bank in my local community, I want to help a family that I know, or perhaps even a family member that may have some enduring health problems or unemployment problems. The other scenario is around the idea that because people can no longer go out to restaurants, because they can't go out to movies, they can't gather in the same sorts of ways that they used to with their friends and family, they're starting to make their everyday needs a priority. And so what that means is somebody who used to go out and buy a latte every day or twice a day in a local coffee shop has now sort of become used to a certain level of coffee quality. And we're seeing an uptick in the purchase of home brewing equipment. There's a lot of online YouTube videos about how to prepare a great cup of coffee at home. And because coffee has become such a ritual and such a part of their life, they're willing to invest in both equipment and in a higher grade of coffee, because it's something that gives them a sense of continuity and a sense of assurance that life will go on. And it's something that they're used to on a daily basis. It isn't just something that they would like maybe go out to a restaurant once a week. You're going to have coffee at least once a day. So I think that there's a real opportunity to really promote fair trade certified coffees in combination and in collaboration with local roasters and local cafes that are also struggling to survive. And I think that we need to put a face on fair trade rather than just statistics. We need to talk about not only individual farmers, but farmer families and farmer communities. Because I think that at the same time that this is affecting everybody across the world, one of the most encouraging things that I've seen is that there's an uptick in empathy. People are starting to realize that we're all in this together. Volunteerism is increasing. People pitching in and helping their neighbors and helping other people in their community is on a steady increase. And I think that this also translates to local companies and coffee producing families and communities half a world away. Next slide, please. So what's Fairtrade doing to help? I mean, Sanjeet talked about the Resilience Fund a little bit. One of the first things that Fairtrade did was to instantly approve increased flexibility in the premium spending. I mean, as many of you know, a certain portion had to go toward quality improvement, yield improvement. It's now really up to the individual PNs and SPOs to distribute those funds as best they know how in the service of their local coffee producing communities. In coffee, these small scale producer organizations, they can fast track decisions about how to spend these without the Global Assembly approval, and really take action to spend funds on initiatives that are going to help in the response of COVID-19, whether that's the purchase of personal protection equipment, whether that's masks, whether that's cash payments just to see us through until the next stage of the harvest. That is really a lot more flexible now than it has been in the past. There's also a general COVID-19 fund. There's actually, I think right now, 3.6 million is in this. And again, it's to help in both short-term and more long-term strategies to deal with the effects of COVID-19. On top of that, Fairtrade International is working with other donor organizations and NGOs to create an additional stream of funding and revenues to be able to increase this amount of 3.6 million, depending upon how long this goes on and what the cumulative impacts will be. Next slide. Oop. Is that the last one? I thought we had one more.
Yep, I think that's the last one. I'm not passing the slides. Apologies.
Okay, I thought that there was one more, but anyway. So, I think that in summary, Fairtrade International is trying to provide whatever resources that we can to the various needs of producer communities. But I think it's really up to the PNs and the SPOs to be able to identify what those needs are. And they have a lot more flexibility in being able to dedicate those funds toward local needs. In terms of what the market is doing, I think that it's really an evolving picture. We don't really know exactly what tomorrow is going to bring, and certainly how long this is going to continue to have an impact. One of the greatest concerns, of course, in both the EU and well, Asia and in North America is if there's a second wave of the COVID-19 and what impact that's going to have in terms of businesses that are now gradually starting to open or may just have curbside pickup or something like that. So I think we can be assured that Fairtrade will, work with other partners to be able to continue to provide funding to the SPOs and the PNs without a lot of red tape. So I hope that answers a lot of questions, and I'll be happy to take some at the end.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your presentation. Let me again share my video. Okay, great. So now, before we get started with Isabella, I just wanted to give the audience a quick note. So I see that we have some folks typing questions into the questions box, and that is great. If you do have a question during a specific presentation and you want to note that in the questions box now, feel free to do so. Just make sure that you are stating who the question is for, because we will open up a 30-minute Q&A at the end of the webinar. So thank you very much for that. And now I would like to introduce Isabella Pacheco. She is from Fairtrade America. She's currently in Washington, D.C. And today she is going to talk to us about current market trends in the United States, challenges and opportunities for Fairtrade Coffee. She is the Acting Business Development Manager for Coffee at Fairtrade America. So Isabella, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you for the invitation and for allowing me to participate on this. It's truly an honor, and I think most of the people participating in this webinar haven't had a chance to interact with Fairtrade America, and obviously not with me. I've been in the Fairtrade system now for a little bit less than 2 years. I'm originally from Venezuela. I've been on the beverage world for about 10 years now. That sounds crazy. And I'm really excited to get to speak about all that we're doing here in Fairtrade America. If you see, I'm going to get the first slide if I could. There. If you see the top graph that I'm showing you there, it tells you a little bit about the history of Fairtrade America. So I will say we're probably, if not the youngest, one of the youngest NFOs in the system. Those are all the years, those are the volumes in percentage of revenue sales through coffee. I entered mid to end 2018, which has been the hardest year for coffee here. As you can see, there was a growth last year of 19%. We want to keep that up. COVID has definitely become a challenge. There are a lot of companies that are putting on hold their projects because, like Peter had mentioned, right now there's a lot of uncertainty, but we are very, very hopeful that that will change, and we'll get into that a little bit on the next slides. I do keep the volume per category there because I think most of us hear a lot that most of the coffee that gets sold here is organic, and it really isn't. I think there is an opportunity for all types of coffee, but especially I wanted to talk about the different tiers and how that breaks up here in the States. I think differently, especially from the European market, people here do go more for specialty coffee. Instant coffee, which tends to be a tier and a category that a lot of people go for, is very minimal, not only within Fairtrade, but in the market in general. And so definitely specialty coffee is something that is growing. If I can have the next slide. Here now you see some of the figures of 2019, and I'll go into why I'm explaining that part. So there's 13 licensees that compose all the coffee licenses here in the States. There is definitely a low number in comparison to other NFOs. We're working hard not only into growing that, but growing that diversely. I would say one of those 13 is Starbucks, which takes a lot of work and energy to maintain. There is, as part of this market and as part of the challenge of being young and new here in the United States, is that the mission is also very new. So one of the things that Fairtrade America has had to focus on is on market recognition and people understanding the value of looking for the mark and buying a product with the mark. With the team itself has done an incredible job, and it's all the graphs and everything is pointing upwards. We already have 28% of consumers that see the mark know what it is, which, if you think about it, it's in the global perspective doesn't seem like a lot, but for an NFO that's been here for like only 6 years in a country that's really big, it means a lot. Also, from the people that recognize it, 48 of them trust the label, which is even more significant because it means that people actually believe that what we do has value. One of the other parts of this is the origins and us focusing a little bit of the energy on developing other origins to make sure that the entire system gets some exposure. As of now, the main 3 origins that we have selling here in the States are Brazil, Colombia, and Vietnam. From Asia, we have Indonesia coming right there at number 4. So Vietnam and Indonesia being the main ones. As for trade specifically, Indonesia is definitely the one leading. And that is because we definitely focus a lot on the specialty coffee as it's what's trending. And Indonesia seems or has provided a taste profile that has sold very well here. I am putting on that slide some of the main traders we work with, some of the main brands and roasters we work with, and some of the retailers we work with. I won't get into detail on those, but I can definitely take questions on those. And on the first slide, but I can also ask Allison to provide my contact information, and we can talk about that if there's any interest. I would like to spend more of the time on the market trends because I think this is kind of what shapes what might happen. I have some trends, consumer trends. These are all based on 2019, so it's pre-COVID, but it'll still be relevant to understand where the market was at least at before COVID started to happen. Coffee, worldwide, tea is the most drank beverage, but in the United States, coffee is the most drank beverage, aside from water. 50% of young Americans say they've had a coffee yesterday. Most of the drinkers of coffee are 60 and up, meaning those are the ones that drink more than 1 or 2 cups a day. But the younger generations definitely are willing to spend more money and go for higher quality coffee. So a millennial won't have 3 cups of coffee a day, but they'll have their very nice latte from the cafe in the corner. Non-espresso based drinks are growing really rapidly here in the States. And that's due to a movement towards ready to drink and cold brews. Definitely cold brews leading that, exponentially growing. There's also home still is the preferred preparation for coffee, and that's definitely increased during COVID. The way most people at home prepare the coffee is drip coffee, and the benefit or the downside to that is that since they've been home and since they've been there a lot, most of them do prepare a full jar of coffee, might not drink the whole thing. Next slide, please. And with those trends, I entered some of like more specific COVID and the top challenges. As Peter said, it's these things. I'm in webinars constantly to hear what people say, and it keeps fluctuating, and nobody really knows for certainty. This is definitely uncharted territory for all of us. Even myself, living in the United States, living in one of the main cities, it's very, very hard to like gauge even the pulse on what people are doing and want to do. One of the really, really big challenges is that, and actually you can see in the map, each bar is the percentage of unemployment or the unemployment claims. And as you can see, April started like exponentially growing. So there's already 14.7% of unemployment, which for the United States is very, very high. So people are really, really scared about the effects that that's going to have on the economy. And the fact that consumers can start going to economical versus actually thought out decisions when buying things, that they're going to start thinking, well, you know, that might be the right thing to buy, but I want to save a little money because I don't know what's going to happen or because I lost my job. The next point and challenge is going to be the riots and the civil unrest that's started here in the United States. I personally, I had to like block some of the stuff on my window because I'm 5 blocks from protests and helicopters flying over. It's created this very, very uncertain climate on top of the uncertainty of COVID. We are expecting there to be spikes of COVID because so many people are on the streets as well. And so this definitely, when, especially for coffee shops and coffee businesses, when we were starting to open, now we have this challenge of now we can't go out because there's civil unrest on the streets. The other part and challenge is the closing of cafes and the fact that we don't know or how to predict what's going to happen even after they reopen. The sales has been estimated, even if we open by July, all cafes open, the sales won't be more than 50% of last year's. And that's basically based on that we're in the middle of the year. But it's been very challenging for a lot of coffee shops. I've been speaking with a prospect that owned 7 coffee shops. She already knows that 2 of them are not going to be able to reopen because she can't afford to keep those 2 establishments. Now she has 5, and from those 5, only 1 could she set up for pickup on the curbside, where because of the space and because she wouldn't be able to comply with all the rules of the soft openings. So they are definitely definitely struggling. And I want to piggyback on what Peter said about also the opportunity that people are trying to support local businesses. So one of the things that I'm trying to do is talking to those prospects that do have the coffee shops, because I think that if we start reopening, there's going to be a really good avenue in connecting them to certified coffee, because people are going to want to support somebody that not only was struggling, but is trying to do the right thing. And then the other challenge is that consumers are still mostly at home, even with the slight opening of certain places. It hasn't picked up as we thought. And then the other challenge is we think that maybe the behavior is also going to be changed a little bit. We're used to going to the office and pick up a drink before entering the office in our Starbucks or corner bakery. And that might not change, but the 3 p.m., oh, don't worry, we'll have a meeting, but let's meet at that cafe, seems to not be happening, and we don't know when that's going to happen again. And that's a very significant part of sales of coffee in general in the U.S. market. And so, again, it's kind of, we have to sit and see how the market starts reacting and how people start reacting to their comfort level of going back into meeting with people and interacting with people in a closer setting. Peter divided his ideas into scenario 1, scenario 2. I think I thought of it as what are the opportunities that are happening immediately, and what are the opportunities that we might go and explore on the longer term side. For the short term, there's definitely some that he already mentioned, like the panic buying and the hoarding. So for a lot of our current licensees, they run out of coffee the first 3 weeks that COVID started. And they were definitely not prepared for the volume and the speed that they're having to prepare that in. But of course, that did give them a little boost in order to continue and to prepare a little bit and create a cushion for what was next. Although we still don't know what is going to be next. That's definitely declined already. Even grocery sales stores have already expressed that the demand for groceries has declined significantly. And that might be in part to the unemployment rate going up, also in part of like people already understanding that this is going to be something that's going to be longer than expected. A lot of these brands also, because supermarkets were running out of coffee when people were panic buying, had the opportunity to make relationship with retailers that were just desperate to have more coffee in their shops because people were claiming for it. So I think this as an opportunity for them to make that connection, to make that relationship, it was very valuable. We also had interesting conversations with grocery chains because of that, because they just were like, can you connect me to a brand? And that was very important, and I think it will pay off eventually for a lot of them in the future. And that takes me to my first long-term opportunity, which are those relationships. I think the consumer here is really valuing brands that were doing it from the beginning, brands that were doing the right thing even before COVID. And those brands are definitely brands that have cared about where they're sourcing from, that were paying the right price, and definitely the label gives them a way to show that they've been doing the right thing. There is an increased consumption of coffee at home, but it definitely is not even reaching the percentage that it's lost on coffee shops. So although it is an opportunity, as Peter said, I think others are exploring. A lot of our licensees and other coffee brands are creating these videos on YouTube, are finding ways to teach and show people how to do coffee in their houses. I actually participated, a lot of coffee chains have done where you invite an office to take a class on how to brew the coffee, and you do this like we're doing now, and that's pretty cool to participate, and it's a way for that coffee shop to make a little bit of money, and then you can recreate the coffee that you picked up every morning before your office from home. That has been an incredible opportunity for a lot of the shops, and it seems to be getting traction and people are interested in. But I think the biggest opportunity, and I left it for last because I do think there is, I'm a hopeful person and I'm optimistic, and I do think there's a lot of hope because the generations of millennials and under are definitely much more in tune and aware of brands that are actually being authentic and being real, caring about what they do, not only saying they do, but actually walking their talk, as we say here. There is a lot of volunteering. There's a lot of local support. People want to have their coffee shops here. They want to know, especially where their food is coming from, where they're purchasing money. And I think that's going to create a movement where brands are going to realize they really need to get their work together. They need to make sure that that they can express the reality of the coffee business. People are reading more about this. People want to know more about this. And so I'm really excited to keep exploring this. I come from a family of producers, not coffee, but of producers, and that's definitely fueled my energy. I think you have here in Fairtrade America a team that is working really hard on creating opportunities to increase the demand of Fairtrade products. So I invite you to reach out. Definitely count on us. We're doing our best to make sure we grow really quickly and but strongly in order to sell more of the Fairtrade coffee. I did participate on my last spot. I did participate on a summit this week, and they were talking about brands for good. And I love that they said that because of this COVID thing, one of the positives is that we now having to be very intentional on what we do. And I think that's a recommendation from the brand to a producer. We don't have space to lose energy. And so if you're true and you're authentic and you stick to what you're actually doing, I think that's going to pay off. And people are actually viewing that, and it's moving forward. It's getting traction. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabella. That was great, and I think it really painted a picture of what's going on in the United States right now in terms of coffee, but also in general. There's a lot of uncertainty. Okay, moving on. Now we will start to hear from some of the producers in the region on the effects of COVID in their coffee supply chains in terms of logistics. What are they doing to mitigate risks, if they're implementing recovery strategies and things like that. So our first guest is from Indonesia, Mr. Armiade Mansur. He is from the Baburayan Cooperative. So I would like to give him the space to speak now. It's all yours.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Alison, for this time presentation. My English not good. For that, I will speak slowly. I'm from cooperative in Indonesia. My cooperative is Koperasi Baitul Kirat Baburayan. Next slide. Alison. My talk there is in the PPT and slide. And my cooperative business start is from 1995, and then in 2006, my cooperative starting join support from the USAID, and then we try to sell coffee to international market, only Arabica coffee. We have a volume potential about 3,000 metric ton. My buyer from USAID, America, is about 90%. And Canada, Great Britain, Australia, then Eropa. We have had problem is from the world during COVID-19 global lockdown. Yeah, from this, and then buyer request the delivery contract for April, May, and June has been postponed until July. This is a started problem because my coffee is buy. We just buy coffee pretty much and for shipping in April, May, June, but buyer say don't send now, don't send today, because the buyer cannot work in his country. But my coffee, we are coffee here, very much just buy, and then now after buy coffee, okay, next. Oh, sorry, Alison. Yes, we started again. Next slide, Alison. Okay, this is the problem. Is my problem, my cooperative problem, or my friend problem is after lockdown, and then next slide, Alison. Yeah, this is on the buyer request. The delivery contract for April, May, June has been postponed until July. We just buy coffee. This is a problem. Buyer request shipment for April, May, and June has been postponed until July. Actually, next, Alison, my coffee will up the stock at the warehouse. Coffee just buy, but cannot sell. Next, Alison. Yeah. The financial, actually, a cooperative only have capital in cooperative in Indonesia very small. Only have 1 or 3 container. But now, this coffee only ready, cannot shipment. And then now cooperative not have money more for buying coffee. And today is high season from member. Next, Elsa. Yeah. Smallholder farmer must sell their coffee to earn their livelihood. But cooperative not have money for buying. Farmer must sell his coffee. Okay. Next. The coffee trader are confused. We are confused now about how the business will pan out the coming month. Want to buy, no money. We won't buy, but no money. Member have to buy coffee. Many farmers sell their coffee to local. Many members sell their coffee to local market, but the price is very low. Yeah, cooperative no have more money, but farmer must sell his coffee for buy food. The low price of the coffee and then increased cost of essential have put the farmer in economic crisis. This is now and here all farmer is crisis because the some put a high price, but he have coffee sell only low price. Next, Elson. The cooperative can only purchase the coffee from the farmers if they are confirmed sell contract from the buyer. We hope only any contract or any shipment for buying coffee. Next, Elson. Today, limited now of the new contract still there. Yeah, very actually per month we can sell 10 container, but now only 1 or 2 container per month. Yes, now have decreased about 19% decrease contract from the last year. We have now strategy for the risk mitigation and recovery strategies is the cooperative have recommended to farmer process and store coffee. We education for farmer to process himself coffee and he dry and then keep the coffee for we hopefully the 2 month more can sell coffee the good price, and then we socialization more, save more and spend less for the money, and distribute we distribute food and material essential for our farmer member, the tribe family. Yeah, only small now. And more, what the strategy risk mitigation and recovery? We almost socialization for food security. We ask member to plain sweet potato, core, taro, and there are some food he can plant in his garden for security and safety food if he cannot buy some food more. Now cooperative coffee here is 23 cooperative in Indonesia coffee from all 28 cooperative. In Indonesia have now 23 cooperative coffee from all member 28 cooperative. Thank you, Alison. This is my presentation. If any question, please send to me. Maybe I can answer some if I can. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amiali, for taking the time to share with us today. Now we will be hearing from another country, from India. I would like to present Mr. Bijuman Korean. He is the president of Manarkalu Social Service Society. Bijuman? Great, the floor is yours. We are having some trouble hearing you. You might want to check your microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning, Alison.
All good.
And good morning, all Fairtrade fraternity. I would like to express my gratitude to the Fairtrade system for presenting the situations in India. Okay. Next. So I'm representing cooperative Manarkadu Social Service Society. We are around 1,360 farmers. And we are all producing Robustas and Arabicas from the hilly regions of Kerala, the southern states of India. Okay, next. Yes, the COVID-19 impacted to India is very severely now. But it was the first reported in my region, actually Kerala only, the 30th of India, the first COVID case reported. And after that, it was slowly spread among different regions. And finally, the central government announced the national-wide lockdown by March 24th. And it was really unexpected to the producers, and guidelines for stay at home and drastic precautionary measures from government was introduced, and a complete lockdown severely affected the basically the producers, and it's disrupted the starting from the food and also non-food products. And the situations emerged to another impact of a lot of companies started layoff as well as salary cuts. That also impacted very seriously among the economy of small farmers as well as the general public. And supply chains of essential commodities also really affected in the initial stage, and the productions and the initial stage only the supply chain supported for the essential commodities, including food and medical items. However, the disruptions started because of from the lockdown period. Even the trucks, initial time, truck cannot travel from one state to other states. So these all really affected, and the producers also not getting essential commodities in initial stage. But the government started supporting them by giving free ration, and even the producers, Fairtrade producers also started supplying the producers by giving cash incentives, as well as few of the producers given the ration and groceries. So the real challenge for India's economy, our Indian rupee also devaluated and depreciated to a certain extent. So that also really affected. Okay, next. Yes, is it we have any market demand right now? This is a question which we have my earlier presentation. My friends from Indonesia also told about the same thing happened in the disruptions of Fairtrade coffee export to India, to global north. Basically, the Indian Fairtrade coffee producers are focusing more in Europe and other north countries. So it's really challenged their supply chain. And initially the restrictions of travel and logistics, which really affected the farm gate purchase, and producers can't purchase. So then we had many of the producers had existing contracts, but the same thing, the buyers are asking for delays of contract, or they are not. Few of them are cancelled. This is a real challenge for the producers. And after the third month, we are really affected the COVID post COVID challenges, and the producers are anxious about our future and the future demand of Fairtrade coffee from the upcoming months. This is what the situations. Okay, next. So is it supply chain disrupted? Yes, it is really disrupted because the coffee harvest was over in India by March. March second week. However, the the coffee curing is very important. The post harvest, the curing centers has to work. And initially it was all closed, but later by April, some relaxation by government, they allowed to work with 30% of workforce. That also really affected. There was output, the productivity of curing center is also very less. So the delays have happened. And really, we have affected the challenges of containers. Lot of, vessels were cancelled, or containers are not available in initial stages. And also the transportation from one district to other districts also restricted. And we have different zones, red zone, yellow zone, and green zone in initial stage, so that if we are in red zone, the operations is not possible. So we have different challenges in the last 3 months. And the documentation side, the main requirement of any export, we need to produce different mandatory documents. In this stage, many officials were not available in the office, so the documents also not received, and the courier service also not operated in initial stages. So now it is just started, the courier service, but the pre-shipment samples, the documents, which are all delayed, and so I feel the complete supply chain disruption was happened. Okay, next. Yes, the price of coffee, definitely the coffee price have been fluctuating since the pandemic happened, and a trend that is likely to continue. Yes, there is really uncertain about the price. Even we have Fairtrade minimum price, but we have that may be one of the reasons we have challenges. The buyers are not able to buy the Fairtrade minimum price. Maybe that's one reason. Okay, supply chain disruptions in shipping, as well as, which I already told, that was a temporary shortage of supply coffee, which put forward Indian coffee price a little bit higher in initial stage. But now the situation is improving. The coffee curing bars are operating in full swing, and the coffee is ready, but the orders are not getting ready. That's a real challenge. Yes, we all discuss about the closure of Horeca segment, and which really impacted our demand, and whether the Fairtrade premium coffee is required for the home segment, or the global north is ready. That which I feel that the presentation from America is also giving an insight to us. Yes, the situation is we have the real challenges. The retail and supermarkets is considerably the main point for the Fairtrade coffee, and the cafes are not working, so the challenges are there. Okay, next. Yes, how it impacted to producers, the farmers, the cooperatives and their members. Yes, the real challenge is restriction to the movement and the migrant workers. The situations in South India, the coffee farms is depends on the migrant workers. Many of the even during the harvest time, the migrant workers are supporting the few of our farmers at least, and also the curing workers. The curing workers are always with the support of migrant workers. They are really returned to their home in the North India, so they are basically, that really affected the supply chain. And in the lack of agri inputs like fertilizers, organic inputs, which really the movement also was impacted and disrupted. So which really affected the before monsoon. Normally, the producers has to use the cultural practice, and that really affected. And the farm workers are not there. The inputs are not there, or it cannot be utilized properly on time. So this really affected, and the future productivity also really questioned. Yes, definitely the South India is really affected the climate change, and during previous 2018 we had a big challenges about our farming due to the climate change, and this was decreased our yield, and we are the same along with the COVID. The another challenge is continuing the decrease of yield is the biggest challenge for the producers. And the lack of cash flow, as we all know that the producers are selling to their cooperatives, and cooperative has to pay their money to their producers in their bank account. This is the system which we are following. However, because of the disruptions, the purchase is not happening, and also the working capital is not with the producers because it's a cycle. The producers has to export, and the importer has to pay their money, and it has to be circulated. So this really affected our supply chain, and this really affected the livelihood of our small farmers. Okay, next. Yes, so what are the mitigation measures which we are practicing? This is what, from our experience as a fair trade producers in India, we need to be more efficient in this coffee trade. Number one, we need to experience, and we need to use our very cost-effective farming practices. We need to follow the in-farm inputs to be utilized. We need to definitely follow the sustainable, organic, biodynamic farming practices. That's only way we need to do the corrective steps, because we cannot depend on any other out-farm inputs, because it's all costly, and the farmers cannot depend on that. So we need to find a mitigation measures as a cost-effective precision farming, which definitely support our farmers. And many of the cooperative already started utilizing their fair trade premium for the risk mitigation programs, including the safeguarding and supporting the farmers in their farmers and workers by providing medical supports, including masks, because in coffee region, the challenge is initial stage there is a lack of many of the hand sanitizers or masks, which we provide to our workers and our farmers. That should continue, and because, and also few of our cooperatives, they share their cash incentives to their members. So Indian government also offered many, Indian government and state government offered many rescue measures for agriculture sector, which we need to adapt. So the challenge is the cooperative has to take the lead for facilitating these reforms measures, how to reach to the end farmer. The cooperative responsibilities that they have to collectively, including the fair trade cooperatives. Many of our fair trade cooperatives in the region should work collectively and work hard for that benefit to be reached the small farmers and workers. And definitely the producers has to be confident. Their confidence has to be the most important to work hard in the farming. So their education and training for them is really challenging, as a physical trainings are really challenging nowadays. So we need to find another opportunities like webinar or other programs. We all are conducting daily meetings with our farmer leaders. So similar level, we need to educate our farmers. So the very important market access is, the south to south. We have a campaign from our central government is be vocal about the local. So we need to focus our business volume with value addition, and we need to find a market for our local consumers also. That's one of our area we need to focus. However, earlier we all know that 30% of our fair trade produce only we could sold to the north market. So we need to find the now the 90% only we need to find a market. So I feel that we need to find a south to south strategy, which is the only way we can survive in this pandemic phase. Next. Yes, we have a future. Definitely, the sustainability have a future, and the people and the people have an empathy towards farmer. People realize the farming is very important, and food is as a top priority. So the longer time need to be recovered, because the pandemic we didn't know, unless otherwise vaccine has to be, evolved. Otherwise, we cannot find any solution. We need to practice this all social distancing and all the safeguarding. So unless otherwise this has to be controlled, the challenges will continue. However, we need to be optimistic and find opportunities. That's only way the producer has to survive. So the 2020 is need to be a survival phase, and the most important thing is labor market. Our migrant workers as well as our domestic workers, they were not having any job. They are jobless. They need to, that recovery is needed. They need to get the money. They need to get the job. So that then only the economy will running again. So that's very important. So we need to support our because the productivity improve, definitely the workers will get the job. That's second future outlook. And definitely we have to adhere the government policies, because we have to collaborate and we have to facilitate. We as leaders of cooperatives, we need to work together along with fair trade and other systems to how to utilize, how to benefit our producers for these government policies and provisions, which is definitely we have to follow that. How to make it recovery for our coffee sector. That's very important. If even the fair trade system is already offered few support to the producers, that's really appreciable, and we need to continue that journey, because that's important. Because the farmer has to survive, the producer has to survive, and his confidence has to continue. That's the only way we can recover from this pandemic. And thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Bijuman, for that very detailed presentation. We are over time today. Give me just a second here. Okay. Yes, as I mentioned, we are a bit over time, so we may extend by just a few minutes depending on how many questions we have. But in the meantime, we will move on to our last presenter, Miss Pham An. She is coming to us today from Vietnam and is the director of POCO Fair Agriculture Cooperative. Pham, it's all you.
Hi everyone and very good morning to you. Thanks Alison for introduction. Let me thank Fairtrade now for giving me a chance to share information in this Fairtrade Asia Coffee Webinar. Especially thanks all participants for joining the webinar and giving us more views on market trends. Before moving to my sharing on effect of COVID-19 across coffee supply chain and logistics in Vietnam, risk mitigation and recovery plan by POCO Farms, let me briefly introduce myself and our cooperative. Next slide. Yeah, my name is Phạm Thị Huyền Anh, or you can call me Phạm Anh. I'm a director of POCO Farms. I also an executive board member of Vietnam Fairtrade Producer Network, a board member of Fairtrade Network of Asia and Pacific Producers. Next slide. POCO Farms were established on January 28, 2009 in Đắc Hà town in Central Highlands of Vietnam by 37 coffee farmers. Until end of 2019, we have 132 members. Our members are more than 90% small producers with a challenging economic situation. We specialize in growing, processing, and supplying 3 types of Robusta coffee: standard quality, high quality coffee, and fine Robusta with unique Đắc Hà flavors. We are one of the first 3 Vietnamese coffee small producer organizations to be Fairtrade certified in 2009. Our floor ID is 21473. We produce approximately 800 tons of Robusta coffee per annum. Our coffee has been exported to US, Russia, UK, Switzerland, Belgium, Germany, etc. Next slide. Yeah, POCO Farms focuses to become a sustainable development cooperative that helps farmers, especially female farmers, to have a better life through responsible coffee producing. Furthermore, POCO Farms always tries best to become the first choice of customers who want to buy Fairtrade certified Robusta coffee from Vietnam. And now, on behalf of Vietnam Fairtrade SPOs, what I'll be sharing about how has COVID-19 affected the coffee supply chain and logistics in Vietnam. Please, next slide. Yeah, next slide. I would like to brief on current situation. As far as all of us know, COVID-19 continues to create a negative impact worldwide. To stop the spread of COVID-19, many countries have implemented border closure, social distancing, and imposed a ban on air and sea travel. Hence, market demand and supply, as well as global business, are severely affected. Until now, Vietnam has been quick with its response mechanisms. The country lifted its 22-day social distancing directive on April 23, 2020, and there has been no report on its spread since April 17, 2020. And now most trades and services are back in business, like public transportation, inter-provincial transportation, local tourism attractions, schools and government offices have reopened with safety measures in place. However, I must say that, in fact, the market, its demand and consumer spending habits have changed negatively as compared to the past. Please, next slide. COVID-19 has affected strongly to supply chain and market. At the moment, Fairtrade coffee sales of Vietnam SPOs have decreased by nearly 30% as compared to the same period of last year. Although from February to May is peak time to sell and deliver coffee, but in 2020, almost coffee SPOs had sold little Fairtrade coffee in this period. Very few Fairtrade sale contracts are signed from March 2020 to date. Coffee market is also dreary. The buyers purchase less. The sellers don't want to sell more because of very low price. Demand from coffee shops and roasters have decreased. Market price fell approximately 17%, comparing price on 29 May 2018 with 29 May 2020. Next slide. And you can see in the picture the downtrend of coffee price from 2017 to date. Current coffee price is in the lowest zone during 10 years since 2010. Next slide. Besides, the logistics and delivery also has been affected by COVID-19. Many companies, shops, factories were closed temporarily and implemented social distancing, which have affected output of coffee. Around 35% of Fairtrade coffee orders have been delayed to ship to buyers. Not only exporting contracts, but also domestic orders have been delayed to delivery. Delay of approximately 2 to 7 months, which will raise costs of storage, bank, or other loans interest, and other expenses. Moreover, livelihood and income of coffee farmers have affected badly. Next slide, please. The regular income of farmers has decreased much. Crop 19 and 20, not only low price but also low productivity let farmers get lower income. Price of other additional products such as durian, avocado, or mango, etc. have seriously fallen due to the COVID-19. Farmers face a debt crisis as their loans continue to increase. Even no organization lets some farmers borrow any more money or fertilizers. Few are selling their farms to cover the loans and trying to find alternate jobs. However, selling farms and finding jobs at the moment is not easy. Climate change has also affected coffee farms and productivity negatively. In the face of this situation, we have tried to mitigate risk by some measures, such as, so next slide, please. We have implemented social distancing and minimized physical meetings. We encourage members to aim for food self-sufficiency by tending their farms, raising poultry, growing vegetables. We also encourage members to sell their farm products online to earn an additional income to sustain through the difficult phase. We also have requested our buyers to grant advance payment for delayed delivery contracts. Besides, we also prepare and apply our recovery strategies. Next slide. For input, we cooperate with our main buyer to provide fertilizer loans to our members. Using Fairtrade Premium Fund to purchase fertilizer to our farmer members and to create an emergency fund to support the vulnerable group. We seek support from government and other sources to conduct various capacity building activities and to provide training courses and other supports for our members to make sure that the productivity and quality of coffee in next crop not be decreased much. We also trying to reduce unnecessary costs as much as possible. For output, please, next slide. For output, joining business immunity and marketing projects of government and other organizations to find more buyers and access new markets. Maintain a good relationship with our current buyers and support them to mitigate the risks of COVID-19 within our capacity. Research and develop coffee consumer products for the domestic market. Especially, we focus on sales and product promotions through e-commerce platforms. However, frankly, this time it's not easy for us to maintain livelihood of members and our cooperative business. However, we believe that if we try our best and have support from our buyers, Fairtrade, government, as well as other sources, we can pass through this struggling time. So stay safe and stay healthy. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Fan. That was great. Let's see if I can, okay, great. Well, we've made it. It's the end of the webinar. However, we still have a Q&A session, and we do have a few questions already in the chat box. I would just like to first thank all of our panelists and speakers. It's been really great to have you all on today. I know we have people connecting from different parts of the world in different times, so we really appreciate you making an effort to be with us today. I'm not sure if the panelists would want to share their cameras or if they prefer to just stay with the microphone. I think whatever you prefer is fine. What I will do is I will open the questions box and read the questions aloud. If you have not yet typed your question, please do so in the questions box. Let's see what we have here. The first question we have is for Sanjeet. So they are asking, may I request you to share your thoughts on what is your concept of smart agriculture and precision farming? I think you are still on mute. You might be locked.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank all the panelists who joined us today and sharing their, to share their insights and thoughts. A very informative session till now. And more importantly, I think the question answer session also is going to be very interesting. A very good question posed about smart agriculture, precision farming, which are both very, very closely related. It's a very vast subject, but I think I'll just share some of my experiences and what my thoughts are on this. I think the most important tool in smart agriculture is the use of digital technology. With increased communication, farmers can anticipate and adapt to changes which are caused by climate change. Some of the initiatives being taken around the world are geotagging of farms and use of sensors to monitor crops and soil health. These are being widely adopted, especially in the region where I was working for the last about 10 years in Southeast Asia. These analytical tools are used to make agriculture more predictive by planning agriculture operations, like when and how much of seeds to be sown, when is the right time to sow them, getting alerts on risks from pest attacks, and so on and so forth. Precision farming, like I said, is very closely related to smart agriculture, is also about using inputs selectively and judiciously, and again at the right time. So the biggest contributor to farm generated greenhouse gases is caused by volatilization and leaching of fertilizers if not applied properly. So it also reduces the fertilizer use efficiency of the particular fertilizer. Plants, I've been working in farms for the last 30 years. So they're I found that they're very, very intelligent species. They only take what is required and dump the rest. So the rest is basically, just being applied there for it to be wasted. And another point I'd like to touch upon is about regenerative farming. I've seen that that just by practicing what we call as a closed loop farming, we can recycle a lot of farm waste to rejuvenate the soils. There could be a difference of opinion from the commercial side, but what we need to do is find the right balance between commercial farming and responsible farming, and that, in my opinion, is the way forward if we really want to practice sustainability. I also know that the biggest challenge to that is change in mindset, but I guess we will have to get there if we need to sustain ourselves. Thanks. I hope I've been able to answer the question briefly.
Thank you, Sanjeet. That's great. We have a question here for Isabella from Gedahun, our colleague from Fairtrade Africa. So on the first slide of your presentation on the Fairtrade sales graph, 90+% of the coffee is conventional. Can you clarify this? Gedahun, are you asking if this is the case? Maybe Isabella, you could comment a bit on this. Isa, I think you are muted. Yeah.
Okay, now I'm on. Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted.
Yeah, no worries.
So, the 90% is from the total of Fairtrade coffee moved in the United States in 2019. So 90% of it was conventional, meaning non-organic or non-instant. Most of the reason that's the case, we do have Starbucks here that really makes the quantities fluctuate a lot. And the most that they move here roasted in Fairtrade terms is conventional. I hope that answers the question.
If they have sent in another question. Oh, we do have a lot more in here today. Ooh, I didn't notice. Okay, let's see. The next question we have, and we'll come back to that, Isa, in case there are clarifications. I'm just going in the order that the questions have come in. This is a question for both Peter and Isabella. Can you provide insight on current stock estimates in the US? I assume this is referring to the stock of coffee that is currently available in the US, unless it's interpreted as a stock market.
Yeah, I think that what you're talking about is the stock of coffees that have been graded through the exchange, right? So I think that based on the opening and closing of the exchange offices, there's really been a lack of consistency in terms of the reporting about what the stocks are in the United States right now. And I've been in touch with International FC Stone, which is a commodities information provider, to try to drill into exactly what the number might be on any given day. So I can get back to you on that.
Okay, great. And I did want to address, we had a question about whether or not we would share we don't get to today, if we would answer those via email, as well as sharing the presentations, and we will do that with all participants. So if we are unable to answer any of your questions today, we can get back to you via email. There are also a couple of questions that are not completely clear. So if I have responded to you about your question not being clear, please do type it out again, or maybe rephrase it to make it more clear. That would be great. We have another question maybe for Nap, that this has been a very useful webinar to know the real situation and what's going on. When are you conducting the same for textiles? I'm not sure if Sanjit can answer this, or maybe one of the organizers.
Yes, we have been working on other crops as well. So, like I said, this is probably the first in the series of webinars we're going to be, we've just organized. And hopefully soon for cotton and for other crops in the region, we will certainly organize another webinar. So just keep a lookout for that. And we hope to see you soon again on that.
Thank you very much. Here we have a question. Is it available new normal issue in the consumer countries? I think this is referring to, is the situation allowing for people to return to their normal activities? Well, I think that really depends on the legislation, but I don't know if the folks in the US want to comment on the current restrictions or lack thereof, if there aren't any. The current restrictions in terms of, is it lack of restrictions? Current restrictions in terms of movement. Yes, could someone please unmute Isabella?
Okay, now I'm not. The way that they're trying to open up here, they're doing it in phases. And phases are established by how essential the business that you're participating or that you work in is. Definitely, they're giving priority to food and those kind of establishments, but we don't see, at least here in the city I live in, Washington, D.C., we don't see ourselves going to the actual physical office, as most of the people that work in offices here before the end of the summer. So by September, so the first weeks of September, we don't think there's going to be 3 phases, and we don't think there's going to be phase 3 until then. As I mentioned before, there are being protests that are not only happening here in DC, but in most of the major cities in the United States. And there is fear that that's going to create a new wave of COVID, which might delay the returns to the office. But we were supposed to enter phase 2 in 2 weeks. That's still not official. And phase 2 would allow us to definitely move around, be in the parks, be able to do picnics, just be definitely enter restaurants with social distancing, with masks, but actually businesses being reopened. That's kind of, again, not very definitive, but what we have now.
Yeah, I guess that I would just add to that it's really on a state-by-state basis. Ideally, we would have a national policy for this, but it's really been left up to each individual state. So we have 50 different answers to that question.
Exactly, and I don't know if any of the producers also want to comment on the current movement restrictions in your countries. Okay, we can move on to the next question for the sake of time. This one is for Bijuman. How can we develop South-to-South markets? I assume given in the current context of the situation.
Okay, that's a great question, because the challenge of producers is to export is really affected. So we need to find south to south, because Asia is a big market for coffee or other fair products. So we need to find a branding for Asian market, as well as we need to find a alternative pricing system for Asian market, because I don't feel that the pricing system which we are offering to the global north is not possible to offer in the Asian market. So we need to have the complete strategy for pricing as well as the product strategy, which definitely the Indonesian coffee, we need to use the Indonesian coffee or Vietnam coffee for India. Definitely the blend, the blended coffee or the different value-added coffee products we can try here in different regions. And the people want to try safe and innovative product. People want to try. So there is a market. So through the digital marketing, we can showcase our branding. We can definitely develop the market strategies, and that's the only way we can. And each producers, each cooperative has to initiate for that. It's a value chain proposition for that. That's what the government policies they have to utilize professionally, because government is already, for example, India is ready to Indian government is ready to support the producers for making India products. So we can develop that government policies as a strategy for our south to south. Thank you.
Thank you, Bijuman. Now we have another question for Isabella. I think the question is wanted to state, what can buyers expect from producers in the Asia region, and how much Fairtrade coffee, Arabica, and Robusta can be expected to be sold from the Asia region? How will this situation affect business volumes?
That is a very hard question to answer.
Yeah, this is a charged question.
I will say that within fair trade and the coffee that gets moved as fair trade, we do very, very little Robusta. That's just what the market demands. And so if we think percentage-wise, definitely Arabica is what sells the most here. I don't have an answer for what they're expecting. I will say, I touched a little bit on the presentation on origins, that definitely volume-wise, Vietnam is leading with the sales here in the U.S., but that Indonesia would be, it's right there. It's at second in specialty, especially in specialty coffee. But I'm more than willing to look into that if you can give me the person who wants those answers and get them a more specific answer via email.
And I would just add that I think one of the, there are so many different factors that are impacting coffee trade around the world. And one that's particular to Indonesia is that Starbucks has closed thousands of stores for the last 2 months. They're one of the biggest buyers of coffee out of Indonesia, specifically Sumatra. And so in the last, 4 to 5 weeks, we've seen the differential for Fairtrade organic Sumatras just collapse. It's now at like what, $4,000 a ton or something like that, and it's really at a much lower level than what we're used to, and it's just because of this one factor. So I think that it's sort of like this kaleidoscope of different elements that are all contributing to the impact on producers and trade in any specific region. And it's really, really hard to sort of extrapolate and say, what is the one thing that we can do in order to increase volumes?
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Isabella. We have another question for Peter here. What is the short-term policy to help coffee farmers? Right now in Indonesia, producers are just starting the crop, assume maybe harvest or seeding, and almost all of the farmers are unable to sell their coffee. What program from Fairtrade can help them?
Good question. You know, as Sanjit said, you know, we have established this resilience fund, which is to help deal with the short-term impacts, particularly around the health crisis of COVID-19. You know, we're at a really unusual place. You know, I've participated in any number of webinars and meetings over the last few years, and usually there's a crisis in one region, whether it's, you know, a frost in Brazil, or whether it's a major weather event in El Salvador, or a coffee leaf rust disease or something like that. The current circumstances that we're encountering affect everybody in the coffee trade. So on the one hand, we hear from Isabella how, you know, it's affecting the commercial side of coffee, that coffee shops are not open, restaurants are not open, people are losing their jobs. From Bijuman, we hear that, you know, farmers don't have enough money to put food on their table, or they have an oversupply of coffee that's now waiting for buyers. I think that, you know, the real challenge is how do we act as a system to address the issue, because everybody is being affected. It's really not just one sector or another sector. Everybody has their issues that have to be addressed. What we all expect to see, which is some sort of level of normal, what we're familiar with. And I think that the fact that this is affecting the entire coffee supply chain and many other commodities and many other supply chains apart from coffee, there's so many unknowns in this. And we as a system have to come up with a collaborative way of addressing the issue and creating a awareness campaign for consumers and for traders about the impacts to producers. Because I think that at the end of the day, unless producers are growing coffee and wake up every day and say, yes, I'm going to go back out and I'm going to continue working on my farm, the whole coffee supply chain collapses. So the more articulate we can be about making that case, and the more specific we can be about the impact that this is having on this one particular product, I think that we're all going to be a lot better off. And I don't have that answer. I'm sorry. I don't have the magic bullet about how do we help coffee producers in Sumatra or Vietnam or India right now, because on the other side of the equation, there are so many different coffee companies that are buyers that are also just struggling to survive. And when I talk with traders, you know, one of the things they say is we're just shifting around coffee right now. There are many coffee companies that have committed to forward contracts that they can no longer fulfill. So they're trying to find a new home for that coffee to somebody who might be in the grocery store business that might have increased demand. But many of the smaller coffee shops and chains of cafes are projecting that they may go out of business in the next 6 weeks or so. So I think that one of the things that we're doing at Fairtrade International and GPM is we've created a series of surveys that we're going to be launching next week. That are going to be international surveys that are directed at both roaster retailers and at traders to help us assess what the effects of COVID-19 are on their businesses, how it affects their buying decisions, what kind of demands they're seeing from their customers, and what increased risks they see in purchasing certified coffees going forward. And I wish that I had that data to share with you tonight or this morning, but unfortunately we haven't started in that process yet. And so I think that within 2 weeks we should have the beginning of that analysis to be able to share with you. And I think that that's going to help us really be able to decide and come together as a community to agree on what the value proposition of certified coffees and fair trade coffees are going forward in this new environment, in this new marketplace.
Thank you, Peter. I hope everyone can still hear me okay. I'm having some connectivity issues. We are over time today, so I think we will go for just a few more minutes, which means we won't be able to answer all the questions, but we will save those questions and provide a summary via email. The last question I think we will touch on for today is for Shuban, and that is, what will be the expected pricing strategy of coffee in the forthcoming days? How may it affect or influence farmers from India? I think you are still on mute.
Yeah, the challenge is we have already few Fairtrade contracts which we are regularly buying with the same Fairtrade minimum price, which we are offering to the the levels of Fairtrade or organic premium which we are offering to the farmers, and that is over. So the current challenge is the price is always a fluctuating mode, and due to the Arabicas are shortage in the market, so the Arabica prices are higher side, and the Robustas, always India is cost effective and Indian price are reasonable to the international market. However, there is a premium for the Robustas, for the washed Robustas and other specialty Robustas. We have a premium price for the Robusta's price. So the challenge is the Arabicas India's price is higher than the previous years. So we are expecting, because there was a due to the shortage, climate change, there is a shortage in the Arabicas in the Arabicas productivity. That is what the reason. However, the current crop, the new crop, there was a good rain, there was a good climate, so we expect a good harvest for the future. So I feel that the price won't fluctuate that much. So we will be having a reasonable price as per the international price models.
Thank you, Bijuman. And so unfortunately, we will need to wrap up today, but I would like to again thank all of the panelists for being with us, especially those that are in difficult time zones, whether it's very early in the morning or very late at night. I would also thank the organizers to NAP. We have some folks behind the scenes managing the PowerPoints and this this tool that we are using. So that's also very important. And then finally, thank you to all the participants. We know we covered a lot of content today. We know there's still a lot of questions that are unanswered. And I think we just need to continue keeping the lines of communication open and making ourselves at Fairtrade available to you all, the producers, during this very difficult time. So again, thank you very much for being with us today. and we will be following up via email. In the meantime, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you again.